Welcome to Discovering. Water, water everywhere, and most of it full of fish. Tonight we'll take a look at the role the Department of Natural Resources fish stocking efforts play in the quality of our fishery.
We stocked about 20 million fish statewide. Most of those are walleye fry. About 9 or 10 million of those are trout and salmon.
Snowmobiling is already here in some parts of the UP and just around the corner in others. We'll get some pointers on what you should do before you hit the trails for the first time this season.
And newer snowmobiles now are way far advanced, but it's also like having a newer car. It's not like you can just do it on the side of the trail.
All that and more, so sit back, put your feet up. It's Monday night and time for Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone, forests thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak, surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields, call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill, the eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
When it comes to fishing, the Upper Peninsula is a fisherman's dream with 4,300 inland lakes and 12,000 miles of streams. Add in the fact that we're bordered on 3 sides by the Great Lakes and you've got a fishery with endless possibilities. These waters are home to a wide variety of fish, but not all of them start their life on the bed of a lake or a river. The quality of this fishery is enhanced and expanded through production, stocking, management, and research implemented by the Department of Natural Resources. The Fisheries Division finished up its fall stocking efforts last month, stocking over 1 million fish. Add in the spring stockings for a total of around 20 million fish this year. The state of Michigan operates 6 fish hatcheries, 2 of which are located right here in the UP, one in Marquette and the other in Thompson.
All the hatcheries have unique programs. Most have a combination of programs for rearing fish for the Great Lakes and for inland. Here at Thompson, our big programs are Michigan steelhead, Chinook salmon, brown trout, and we also hatch all the walleye for the Upper Peninsula. We rear about 500,000 steelhead every year, and those are all stocked in the spring. Just a little under 500,000 Chinook, also stocked in the spring. About 200,000 yearling brown trout stocked in the spring. Up to 3 or 3.5 million walleye fry, and the walleye fry are distributed to management unit ponds throughout the UP for rearing to about 2 inches long, and then they're stocked in the midsummer. The stocking program in the UP is a mixture of Great Lakes and inland stocking. Marquette stocks lake trout all over the state, both inland and Great Lakes. We go as far as Harbor Beach down in the Thumb with lake trout. Marquette also stocked about 250,000 splake. Most of those go into the Great Lakes, quite a few into Lake Superior. Munising, Copper Harbor, and Marquette all get stocked with splake every year. We also stock about 100,000 brook trout out of Marquette every year, about half in the spring and half in the fall. Those brook trout go primarily in the UP. As a matter of fact, maybe entirely in the UP.
In order to release 20 million fish into the wild, you first have to raise them. Many of them start their life right here at the Marquette State Fish Hatchery.
Jeremiah and Kevin are sorting out the right females from the green females. In the next 4 weeks or so, they'll eventually out ripen, but we only can use the ripe ones right now. And that's the size of the fish. they're sleeping, they will wake up in 5 or 6 minutes. And then they take the anesthetized fish, the ripe anesthetized fish, rinse them, get all the anesthetizing fluid off of them, dry them off a little bit with a towel dry, and then they wash the anesthetizing fluid off themselves so it doesn't get in the pan and affect the fertilization. You take a female, and each pan is numbered, so each female got a number to it, is assigned a number. That female is milked into that pan completely into one pan. We tell the difference between the sexes of the fish is the female will have a shorter head and the mouth is closed. The male will have a kype. And what we do is squeeze the belly right here, and the vent will open up a little bit, and this is the ripe fish. A green one will be, nothing will come out. It'll just be hard. She got eggs inside, but you squeeze the belly and nothing will come out. So she'll be put back in the water and probably spawn next week. And with the eggs come out the ovarian fluid. And the ovarian fluid we check for bacteria kidney disease. We have to take a sample of ovarian fluid from each female and a sample of milk fluid from each male. And that ensures that bacteria kidney disease is not transferred from generation to generation. That bacteria would be in ovarian fluid and absorbed into the inside the egg. And when the egg is fertilized, that young fish grows up with bacteria inside the egg, and it doesn't realize that it's harmful bacteria, and it doesn't create defenses against it. So what we're trying to do is cut the cycle of transfer from the female to the young fish and from the male to the young fish. We send these samples out to get tested positive or negative for bacteria kidney disease. And if the test comes back positive, we call the whole family. If the test comes back negative, then we keep that family and raise it as production fish and broodstock fish. The male fish will be more colored, and it's got a narrower abdomen than the female. Longer head, and the jaws have got a little bit of a kype to it, meaning it's crooked. In spotting the male, you just grab it and bend the tail a little bit, take a little squeeze, and that's his contribution to the next generation. In the spawning process, we always like to cross our 2.5-year-old males with our 3.5-year-old females. The idea there is when you don't spawn with the same year class, you're less likely to have sibling or close relative matings. Genetics are a big part of the hatchery operation now. That we like to maximize our spawning population as much as possible. We spawn on a 1-to-1, one female with one male. We don't pool our milk or pool our eggs. So by spawning 1-to-1, we create a bigger genetic pool. By getting a bigger genetic pool, you're helping the fish with an increased disease resistance. They have a tendency to have multiple fin rays if their genetics are too close, and then they'll be short and fat type. They won't be symmetrically aligned. That's all due to poor genetics in hatchery fish. So by taking 1 teaspoon of eggs per family, we're ensuring that one family doesn't create all the genes to the next generation. And we try to spawn 100 or more families. Now here we're going to be doing 240 families per year. That goes to about 60 families per egg take for 4 weeks throughout the spawning season. And here the eggs are being fertilized by the milk. The fertilized eggs are brought in over here. This process is just a matter of rinsing out the dead eggs and the excess milk in the pan. And we got a little bit of erythromycin or antibiotic mixed with the water, and then set aside. Egg absorbs the hardness out of the water and the calcium and magnesium out of the water, and sealing the micropyle on the egg where the sperm swims through, forming a hard shell on the egg. The white eggs are dead eggs. Orange eggs will develop into young fish. After the water hardening process, we disinfect the eggs, and then they're brought into these inside heath trays. A heath tray is nothing more than a screen box, and the eggs are incubated right inside of this screen box. It works very similar to what nature would do. Here the heath trays percolate water up from underneath the heath tray. It bubbles over the top of the heath tray and down, delivering fresh cold water and carrying away the waste products, delivering oxygen to the egg. You start seeing eyes in about a month. Blake here are eyeing up already, which were taken last month. You can see little black eyes inside of the eggs just starting to form, and then they'll start to hatch around end of January.
The walleye, we incubate in this is called a jar battery. This is called a hatching jar. The water comes in from this head box in this little tube here at the bottom, and this will be full of eggs, and walleye eggs are really small. They're about 100,000 eggs per quart or per liter. So if you had 3 liters of eggs in here, you'd have, you know, over 250,000 or 300,000 eggs in each jar, and we'll have this upper bank, both sides will be full in the spring. We'll start off with 12 or 13 million walleye eggs that we'll collect over at Beta Knock, and they'll incubate in here for about 20-25 days, and when they start to hatch, they just swim out of this jar into this trough. They drop into this trough, and then they swim out of this trough and go into that tank right there. And 3 or 4 days after they hatch, we take them, harvest them out of that tank, and then we send them out to walleye rearing ponds where they're reared for about 45 days, and they get up to about 1.5 to 2 inches long in that period. And then they're from that point they're stocked in lakes and Great Lakes and inland lakes. And if you wanted to get a listing of all the current stocking locations, you can go to the Michigan DNR website. It's www.michigandnr.com/fishstock. What we're doing here is we're grading steelhead. We grade steelhead because they're a fairly slow growing fish, and we want the biggest fish we can get for stocking in the spring, and so by separating we can double the size of the biggest fish we have. So this is a mechanical grader that separates the fish based on their width. So the small fish fall out at the head of this system and the big fish are carried to the end. These fish, these are the small, we call them runts, and then the fish down in these baskets in the lower end here are the bigger fish that we're going to keep for stocking in the spring. These are at least twice the size of the small fish, and you know we're handling, you know, almost 1 million fish. So without a mechanical kind of grader like that, it would be almost impossible to do this. We feed probably about 100,000 pounds a year to all the fish, not just the steelhead. This is ground up menhaden, anchovies, herring. These feeders are filled every morning. They're on an automatic timer. The rations are calculated based on how many fish are here or how much weight of fish is in each tank. Tanks have to be thoroughly cleaned and scrubbed every day, and that's 7 days a week, 365 days a year. There's somebody working here every single day of the year. And when they're not working, there's somebody on call, because all this water flowing here is all pumped. It's from wells or aeration pumps. If any of those fail, there's a potential we could lose everything within 15 or 20 minutes. So everything's monitored with an electronic alarm system. So if a pump fails, a well fails, some critical, there's 45 points that are critical in our alarm system. Somebody gets called in, and you know it's their responsibility to correct the problem and get the water flowing or whatever it is that's failed.
Marquez State Fish Hatchery is responsible for stocking brook trout, lake trout, and splake throughout the state of Michigan. Most of the habitat for those char species are in northern lower Michigan and upper Michigan. We do make a few runs with splake down into Pontiac, Michigan, and some of our lake trout go into southern Lake Michigan and Lake Huron. Our brook trout lakes are in upper Michigan. Upper Michigan is very unique as far as brook trout habitat goes. It's in the very southern fringe of brook trout habitat. You go south of us into lower Michigan and there's very poor brook trout habitat. The water's warmer and the lakes are warmer and they don't support trout populations. But as you move north through the upper Michigan, most of the small streams are small, very low volumes, and every 20 miles or so along the shoreline of Lake Michigan you have cold water streams entering. These streams are very cold, but they're very non-productive, meaning there's very little nutrients. And nutrients is a direct correlation on how big the fish will grow, along with the stream volume. And the smaller the stream and the less food, the smaller your fish will get. So characteristically, many of upper Michigan's streams produce very small fish, and you just don't have the water volume to and the nutrients to grow bigger fish. But we have to deal with what nature gives us here in Upper Michigan. And these are these small streams that most of them are naturally producing, so we don't have to stock them. But our lakes in the Upper Peninsula are made in the Ice Age period. They're glacial lakes, glacial till kettle lakes, and where an iceberg has gotten flooded with sand, and then the iceberg is obviously melted, and you end up with a kettle lake or a pothole lake, we'll call them. And they produce characteristics. There's groundwater, and there's cold water environments, and it's perfect for trout. But the problem is the trout don't have a spot for natural reproduction. Oftentimes there's no inlet or no outlet, and if there is a inlet, it enters into a sandy stream, and the fish, brook trout, do not have a place to naturally produce. So the Department of Natural Resources Fisheries Division has biologists have identified these pothole lakes, kettle lakes, and identified them as suitable habitat for brook trout. And our primary goal in the brook trout program is to stock these lakes and create a brook trout fishery. And they're scattered north of Newberry, south of Munising, north of Marquette here, and south of Republic area, and all the way down to Iron County and Crystal Falls area. They'll make it through the first year, half of them will be legal. Second year, all of them will be legal, and oftentimes the third and fourth year they'll be catching little nice big 15 to 24 inch fish that have been reported in many of our lakes.
There are two things for certain about snowmobiles. One, they are much more reliable than their older counterparts. And two, they'd better be, because the days of firing up the machine, hitting the snow with a pocket full of spark plugs, one wrench, and a quick fix along the trail are long over. Whether you're a do-it-yourselfer or you bring it into the local shop, a pre-season checkover is a great way to avoid unwanted problems on the trail. I talked with Glenn at Redline Sport and Marine in Norway to get some tips.
This snowmobile here is coming in for its pre-season checkover. The biggest thing we do is go from one end of the unit to the other. You want to check your brakes, your parking brake, to make sure that all that stuff is still good working condition. You still have steering components on these newer models. They're over to the side now. There's a lot of grease points that you should grease every year, and check and make sure cotter pins and safety devices are still in place. I think the clutch is the most important part on the snowmobiles nowadays because it drives it. If there's any bit of wear, debris, anything in here, it causes fuel mileage problems, belt problems. Very few people they do maintenance on them when they need to, not preventive maintenance at all. Mainly just taking the cover off like I've got here, just to get in here and be able to check the weights and the rollers. And I'll just grab a hold of the roller if I can move it up and down. A lot of times you got to replace the roller or the bushing. Same with the weight. Here is one that no longer is good. The weight moves back and forth, and this roller moves back and forth. And with this being worn, a lot of times it'll wear or break a belt, or it will not get up to the RPM that it usually does. So then you're lacking power, you're using a lot more fuel. Probably the most important thing, I think, on a snowmobile that needs to be maintained, because there's a lot of moving parts all the time. And this is also another, the secondary clutch is also something to look at too. These little plastic sliders right here will start to wear. You'll have clutch problems. It just won't work the same as it did when it was new. Usually on a belt, I will check the height of the belt to the side of this. What'll happen after a while from it wearing, it will get too thin. And you'll sit down lower into this, what they call a secondary sheave. So it's almost flush. Usually they stick up a little bit on varying models. When you look at a belt, you look for if there's any cracks inside the bottoms. And you kind of rub your fingers around it and see if there's any marks that from the clutch grabbing too hard actually burns a spot out of it. So you'll just kind of rub your fingers around it and see if there's any variation. The track itself, you want to make sure there's no big tears in it, no pieces hanging off it. Sometimes what'll happen is these little windows here will tear apart. You kind of want to look at that. Lift it up somehow, support it, be able to run the track around. Be able to look, and that's one thing we do is we put it on the hoist and lift it up, and I inspect the track. Check the tension of the track, check your slides here to make sure they're not worn out. If you need to replace your rails here, it gets quite costly. idle wheels too. A lot of times you might get a rock in here, it tears the wheel apart, or the bearing starts to fall apart. The wheel will fall off sometimes, so you know, when it's in the air and suspended, I'll go through and I'll turn each wheel, make sure all the bearings feel good, make sure everything's set for winter. At the end of the year, I would definitely put stable or a fuel treatment in it, run it long enough to get the fuel treatment through the unit itself. A lot of them have a fuel shutoff valve. Doesn't hurt to shut the fuel off and run. Some of them have carburetors still, run them dry. You know, the fuel injected models, you really don't have to do that much with them, but it is still good to run some fuel additive through them. And a good thing is maybe to get in a habit while it's warm, go through, grease it, get it basically all ready for fall or winter. So you have just less things to do in the wintertime. Most people, when they're wanting to go snowmobiling, they want to go now. They don't want to have to bring it in and wait a week to get their snowmobile back. They want to be able to hop on it and go. So sometimes we'll have people bring their sleds in early so they're all ready to go. Preventive maintenance is very crucial now, especially with the new 4-stroke engines. It's a lot harder to get to spark plugs. It's, you know, the oil changes now are that they're an hour to 2 hour job sometimes because you have to remove a lot of this versus, you know, when we get into an older snowmobile, you were able to put your spark plugs in and you were able to do just dump oil in the gas and go. You know, the newer 4-stroke and newer snowmobiles now are way far advanced, but it's also like having a newer car. It's not like you can just do it on the side of the trail. It almost needs to go to a dealership or, you know, a repair facility that's equipped to do the type of work on a new snowmobile.
If you're a hunter or a gun enthusiast, you may want to check out the Big Brothers Big Sisters 52 gun raffle. They'll be raffling off 1 gun a week for an entire year. Drawings begin January 1st. It'll cost you less than $1 a week, and proceeds go to fund outdoor programs and youth programs here in the UP. For more information, check out bbbsbayarea.org. Well, that's it for another week. Get out and enjoy the UP winter, and we'll see you next week right here on Discovering.